Yeah, there it is, folks. That would be the last verse of, you guessed it, The Man That Got Away, one of the greatest torch songs of all time. Music by Harold Arlen, lyrics by Ira Gershwin, and sung into eternity by none other than the great Judy Garland in the 1954 version of A Star Is Born. Yes, that's the little Licorice Alive section of The Man That Got Away. And I can tell you, I'll never forget when I first saw that in the movie. Judy's in a nightclub. It's after hours. The waiters are turning over chairs, and the musicians are gathered casually in front of that little nightclub stage as Judy breaks it down soul-wise and music-wise. Most memorable for myself, as I watch that and as I ruminate about it and think back, was that clarinet player sitting sort of in shadow in the bottom right corner of the frame, his licorice stick in hand, and he was blowing in and around Judy singing. He was so cool, so quietly hip, so understated and musically devastating. And man, I thought to myself, yeah, I know I can't sing, but how cool it would be to play that clarinet. I want to chew on that licorice. And so the seed was planted. And there you go, a little version of it. Licorice Alive. Anyway, welcome, folks. It is, well, this little podcast experiment is chugging along. We're now at episode 16, so thanks for clicking into that latest installment of Rebel Without Applause, coming to you live once again from the cozy confines of my movie studio apartment here in the Wood of the Holly. I'll be trying to break it down truth-wise and maybe laugh-wise, hoping to explore the netherworld of my brain and just maybe shed a little light into yours. How do I see myself? I'm just an abstract and brief chronicler of this, the cockeyed caravan called life. So where are we? Where am I? I'm clearly still in the recovery from the catastrophe that is Kavanaugh. Oh, God, he is such an idiot. My final thought on the matter is, what I want to know is, who was the short Jewish guy that sat behind him in law school? Because I just don't believe his professed intelligence. Anyway, it's all so depressing. After that Senate vote, I felt the same way I did after the 2016 election. No choice but to bury myself inside my usual distractions: sports, surfing, movies, sex if I'm lucky, and of course, my trusted clarinet. All I can say is, this time around, thank God the Dodgers made it to the divisional series. The Rams are on a roll. And the the Lakers are about to tip it off for a fresh season of basketball. So where are we? What's up? Oh, yeah, I'm looking at the news. It looks like another red state revenge storm is about to smash into Trumptopia. That being the panhandle of Florida. Today is none other than Columbus Day, or maybe we should call it Indigenous Peoples Day, where we memorialize, if not celebrate, that glorious moment in October of 1492 when the great Italian navigator happened upon our continent. They all laughed at Christopher Columbus when he said the world was round. Great song, by the way. They all laughed. Anyway, who was this guy? This distant figure out of our mythological past. Columbus was an intrepid explorer, to be sure an expert navigator and colonial subjugator. He set sail in search of a better trade route to the fabled lands of South Asia, where his hope was to score cool spices and exotic tapestries, erotic nubiles, and fresh deposits of gold, which would make himself and his royal patrons wealthy beyond imagination. Glory be to God, glory be to Spain. But rather than playing it safe and tooling around Africa like his predecessor Vasco da Gama did, before him, Chris Columbus had a hunch. A voice within shouted, "Go west, young man, straight into the dark heart of the Atlantic Ocean. There will be the riches of Asia." And in doing so, he perpetrated the biggest navigational fuck-up in human history. Yes, he was correct that the world was round, but wrong about the size of the world. He envisioned a much smaller globe. Think the difference maybe between a soccer ball and a basketball. He saw a soccer ball when, in fact, the globe that we are living on is more akin to a basketball. It's sort of fun to speculate on what might have been had his 3 little sailboats actually arrived at his preferred destination in India. He very well might have been the first to bring yoga to Europe. To be sure, the corner of 59th Street in Central Park West would not be called Columbus Circle, and most importantly, Cleveland's Major League Baseball team would have a different name. Maybe, I don't know, the Cleveland Aborigines or the Cleveland Eries after the lake, or the Cleveland Mistakes for Mistake by the Lake. Or if LBJ had not left the Cavaliers for the Lakers, maybe they would have been renamed the Cleveland LeBrons, but certainly not the Cleveland Indians. Such is the game of chance we call history. And so it was that the great navigator mistakenly happened upon this huge continent, the very same continent upon which I am now podcasting. Surrounded by a necklace of verdant isles, he stumbled upon a most curious breed of humanity, which he mistakenly referred to as Indians. And once he planted the flag of Spain on the fresh soil of this strange world, he busied himself doing what intrepid conquistadores do. He enslaved, he raped, he pillaged, and unknowingly he and his minions, armed with the greatest weapon of all, immunity from European diseases, wiped out the local Caribs. Those were the Indians who lived on those islands since God knows when. And he happily converted all the survivors to the joys of Christianity, and once their souls were secured to their place in eternity, he initiated a genocide that would persist until the dawn of the 20th century. Now, some argue that Columbus was personally culpable for the catastrophic history of conquest that followed, perhaps so. But to my mind, he was just at the steely point of a very long and heavy spear that extended all the way back into the cold heart of medieval Europe. And so it goes. For my Italian brothers, thank you, Christopher Columbus. For everyone else, for all those Indians or those Caribs that first greeted him, gee whiz, sorry about that. And by the way, if you want to see a great movie about Spanish conquest, check out Werner Herzog's Aguirre, Wrath of God, or in German, Aguirre, Zorn des Gottes, starring Klaus Kinski. Oh my God, really, one of the greatest movies of all time. Anyway, movies. The other night, I was fortunate enough to see the 4th installment of A Star is Born. Now, for me, that title has sort of a mystical connotation. It perpetrates the myth that the stars we love are indeed divine creations. They are born, not made or manufactured, not willed into existence through practice or determination, but dropped Jesus-like into the manger. It's as if some magical concoction of fairy dust that we call talent, or that little something extra is sprinkled on these chosen few at birth, and we, their ever so faithful subjects, we, the fans, can only, if we are lucky, admire them from afar. Of course, that fairy dust comes at a price, and that price is the stuff of A Star is Born. Actually, it's always interesting for me to see movies that I actually auditioned for. I read for the Bradley Cooper part, but he gave it to himself since he was the director. I guess, who knows, he had connections. No, just kidding. Actually, truth be told, I did read for the small part of Wolf, who was one of the limo drivers who worked for Andrew Dice Clay. Yes, the same Dice Clay, comedian Dice Clay, who, in this case, he played Lady Gaga's dad. And the guys they eventually hired looked way more gangster, way more grizzled and Dice-like than I ever did. They kind of looked like the Johnny Friendly Boys and On the Waterfront. So, whatever. Another part I didn't score. Another year I didn't qualify for that SAG health insurance, which, frankly, I need so desperately. Would have been nice, but it wasn't in the cards. But hell, honestly, I wouldn't have cast me in that part either. Still, I would have been pleased to have been miscast, because the operative word in Hollywood, if you are an actor, is get cast. By hook or crook, miscast, well cast, don't matter, get cast. Still, what can I say? I gave it my best shot. I prepared, I memorized, I even improvised. That's right. When I walked into the little casting office, I was slow scatting the melody to The Man That Got Away, the tune I just played. And ironically, the young casting assistants, they had no idea where that tune came from till I filled them in. So at the very least, they learned something. Oh, well, what can I say? I tried. Anyway, back to the movie. Like its predecessors, A Star is Born is a meditation on the trappings of celebrity and art, love and addiction. And I think the current version did very well with the first three, maybe not so well with the last. And by that I mean the addiction part. Not that I didn't believe Bradley Cooper's performance. I did. He was good. I believed him. He wore the rock star mantle comfortably. He carried his hidden demons with aplomb. I love that word, aplomb. But nobody looks as handsome and as fit as Bradley Cooper and takes that many drugs and imbibes that much alcohol. He looked too fucking good for his circumstance, but whatever. He's a star. He directed the movie, so, he'll get a pass from me on looking too good for the part. It was just, it was just that his self-abuse was so obvious, so out in the open for everyone to see, and yet nobody in the movie, by that I mean no character in the movie, uttered a word. Not Lady G, not his brother Sam Neill, that's the guy, the great voiceover guy, and not any of his loyal roadies or, the cool chauffeur. They just stood by and they watched him destroy himself. For me, I just wanted to scream something from the audience, and I would have, but the ushers at ArcLight warned that they'd kick you out if you shouted at the screen. So, I kept it to myself. I stayed quiet. Anyway, none of those characters said a word. Now, that might have been cool in the 1937 William Wellman version with Frederick March and Janet Gaynor, or the 1954 George Cukor iteration with Judy Garland and James Mason, or maybe even the Babs, by that I mean Streisand version with Chris Christopherson in 1976. But in 2018, with celebs offering themselves annually and rehab retreats stocked with the Afflecks and Downey Jr.'s of the world, you would think that someone might have intervened or even politely suggested, yo, dude, maybe it's time to check yourself into promises or possibilities or passages or purposes or pathways, any one of the many rehab retreats that start with the letter P that are littered across the hills of Malibu, all of which are ready to escort the rich and famous into recovery for a cool 50 G's a month or a week or a day, I'm not sure. But it never happened. Jack Maine, the main character, he didn't make it to rehab till, well, he did, but not till the very end of the movie. And by then, frankly, it seemed like there was just no escaping his fate. After all, the other guys in the other movies had killed themselves, so Bradley, since this was a sequel, was obligated to do the same. The only surprise for me was that instead of wading into the ocean like James Mason or Frederick March did, Bradley broke the canon against self-slaughter and offed himself somewhere up in the mountains in his garage, surrounded by all his boy toys and rigs and whatnot. And by the way, that part I get, because, if I ever offed myself, I want to be surrounded by my quiver of surfboards and paddleboards, beside my kayak with my scuba and fly fishing gear spread all around me. So, yeah, I get that. Okay, Bill. Easy on the sarcasm. Control the jealousy. Don't want my inner competitiveness to corrupt my ability to enjoy the movie. That's an easy trap for us embittered showbiz souls. So let me say it for the record. It was a good movie. I enjoyed it. My girlfriend cried. And most importantly, I did get laid afterwards. So A Star is Born lived up to its distinguished pedigree. Still, it is my holy obligation as an out-of-work and frustrated screenwriter to look for holes the story problems. It's my job to ponder what I would have done if anybody from Warner Brothers had bothered to ask me, but none did. So whatever, I'm just another dude with a podcast and an opinion that doesn't matter. But my fave version is the Judy Garland version, the Man That Got Away version, where in the end, James Mason, as the fading alcohol-addled movie star, wades into the waves of Malibu and into the annals of cinema lore. It is definitely worth a revisit. Really, really gives you a glimpse into the fame game, the Hollywood of old, the studio system that sustained that game. It's just a great movie. A lot of it was shot right on the Warner Brothers lot. It was a Warner Brothers movie, and it just reeks of reality. And if you get a chance to catch up to this movie, do it, because it gives you a real feeling for the studio system. And, of course, my favorite parts of the movie is The Man That Got Away, the song that I played earlier on the clarinet. Just beautiful, and it became an instant singer standard. Not an instrumental standard, really. It's a little long. It kind of has a difficult sort of, not that the chord changes are difficult, it's just that it's kind of long for that purposes. But for a singer, it is indeed a great measuring stick of a song. Frank Sinatra sang it. He switched the words a little bit. James Darren did. Shirley Bassey's got a great version. Ella sang it. A lot of great singers tackled it, but none better than Judy Garland did. And then, in addition to that, there's her big set piece pre-intermission performance of Born in a Trunk at the Princess Theater in Pocatello, Idaho. It is an off-the-charts performance. It is a sort of form of cinema wizardry. It's a real showstopper, and it's totally worth seeing. It is a mature and nuanced musical expression, not only by the performer, but by the director, the editing. Just the total conception is really thrilling to see. It's classic Judy, and that is saying something because, frankly, I'm not gay. I'm straight. I'm a straight guy saying it's classic Judy. It's great Judy. It's incredible Judy. And then in addition to Judy Garland, the cast is rounded out with James Mason, same James Mason that we've seen in a million great movies, and I'm blanking on all of them as we speak. And I love Charles Bickford as the studio head. Charles Bickford was a real Hollywood veteran, a movie veteran. He was seen as a young man in the Eugene O'Neill cinema adaptation of Anna Christie with Greta Garbo, but he's much older and wizened in this. Charles Bickford, he plays the studio head. And then there's Jack Carson as the vindictive PR executive who gets his opportunity at payback as the movie unwinds and the tragedy unfolds, and it spells the tragic fate of Norman Maine. If you get a chance to check out the 54 version on Turner Classics, check it out. Look for it. It's great. The film also has special meaning to me for family reasons. It just so happens that my grandfather was a big executive at Warner Brothers back in those days. His name, Ben Kalmanson, and he started there at Warner Brothers in 1927, and his story is a uniquely American one. He was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the child of Russian immigrants, and when he arrived with his family as an infant, when they arrived in this country, they enthusiastically, as many people did, converted from Judaism to capitalism. And my family has remained dedicated to that creed ever since. Anyway, as the family legend goes, he grew up in the steel mills. He worked in the steel mills as a young guy, scrapping in a tough guy neighborhood with a family of 4 brothers. And one day, he found his way into, he was selling cars after he left the steel mills. And one day, turns out he sells 2 cars, not 1, 2 cars, to this movie sales dude from Warner's First National. And this guy, in those days, Warner Brothers was called Warner's First National. It was a slightly different corporate configuration than it is today or was then. Anyway, this guy from Warner's was so impressed with this 5'7" Jewish dynamo, he hired him on the spot. And his instructions were simple. Benny, go amongst them, sell our movies, book them into theaters. And so Benny K, that's Benny Kalmanson, set out in his Model T with a ukulele and sang the songs of those early Warner First National musicals to small-town theater owners across Pennsylvania. And after a 2-week trial, he dropped his gig at the car lot and started selling the Warner movies, which at that time were a powerful staple of melodramas, Depression-era musicals, and most famously those great urban shoot-'em-ups that featured the likes of Jimmy Cagney, Bogart, Edward G. Robinson, and Paul Muni. So turns out that my Papa Benny, that's what we called him, was in the right industry at the right time, with the right product, in the right area. And he was massively gifted at this movie sales gig, and he quickly rose through the ranks of the company. And within years, he was vice president of distribution, and by the 1960s, he was president of Warner Brothers, which he presided over from his office at 666 Fifth Avenue. By the way, that's the very same building now owned by future felon and billionaire brat boy son-in-law Jared Kushner, but don't go there, Bill. Stay focused. Don't wander. No politics, no politics, no politics. Anyway, my grandfather, Ben Kalmanson, he retired from his perch as top dog of Warner's in 1969, and he crossed to the other side in 1974, which was my senior in high school. And sadly for me, I never really ever had a chance to talk to him about the biz, the world to which I aspired so deeply. And as they do for all of us, except for maybe Shakespeare, Charlie Parker, and Mark Twain, the sands of time have blown over the likes of my grandfather. But on those rare occasions when I'm on the lot in Burbank, I do make it a point to slip inside the studio museum and take a peek at his photo next to Jack Warner, the studio namesake, the youngest of the brothers, who I actually met briefly when my grandfather brought him to my bar mitzvah right at the tail end of their careers. And he came with, my grandfather came with Jack Warner and Mervyn LeRoy. And he also was a great director in his own right. He started in the silent era, and if you want to see a great Mervyn LeRoy movie, check out I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang with Paul Muni, maybe the greatest prison movie of all time, but that's for another time in another podcast. Anyway, the Garland version, the 1954 version, was a huge movie for Warner's. They had monster premieres in Los Angeles, New York, London, and sadly for the studio, the picture came up a tad short at the box office, and I don't think it won any awards, but box office and Oscars are not the metric that matters. The test of time is. And without a doubt, George Cukor's A Star is Born ranks right up there with Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard or Francois Truffaut's Day for Night as maybe the best movie about movies of all time. So that's about it for this podcast. Once again, thank you for tuning in to Rebel Without Applause, my ruminations about movies and music and everything and nothing. I am eternally grateful for you for tuning in. If you happen to last this long into the podcast, how about going over to the iTunes page and podcast page and writing a little review for me or throwing me some stars? But either way, if there's one thing I've learned from this process, is that my need to express, my need to indulge in this microphone therapy far outweighs anybody's desire to hear me. So if you did, I wanted to extend to you my gratitude and goodbye, adios, and adieu.